Hey, it's Mike Hambright with FlipNerd.com. Welcome back for another exciting expert interview where I interview successful real estate investing experts and entrepreneurs in our industry to help you learn and grow. If you haven't checked out the new FlipNerd.com, please go check it out. We've changed quite a few things, and I think you're going to love it. Today, I'm joined by Dave Schumacher. He's the president and founder of Tax Title Services, and while you may not know him yet, he's a leader in the title industry. In fact, many of the products that you buy today from title companies are products that he was probably involved in creating. And so we could spend the entire show today talking about title policies and title insurance and title search and all that, but we're not. We're actually going to talk about Dave's story of starting out of college with an interest in real estate investing and finding himself working in a title company and starting a small business that has had both great times and bad times, and how he's made it through. And while it's a different business than many of you that are listening have, I think you're going to hear a story that every small business can identify with. And so before we get started with Dave, though, let's take a moment to recognize our featured sponsors. RealtyMogul.com is an online marketplace for real estate investing, connecting borrowers and capital from accredited and institutional investors. Get a rehab loan fast and close in as little as 10 days. Rates start as low as 9%. We'd also like to thank National Real Estate Insurance Group, the nation's leading provider of insurance to the residential real estate investor market. From individual properties to large-scale investors, National Real Estate Insurance Group is ready to serve you. Please note, the views and opinions expressed by the individuals in this program do not necessarily reflect those of FlipNerd.com or any of its partners, advertisers, or affiliates. Please consult professionals before making any investment or tax decisions, as real estate investing can be risky. Hey, Dave, welcome to the show.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here. It's I tell people that listen to the show often they kind of know now that there is kind of a pre-show part of the show. So I always talk with the guest that's going to be on, and we always talk about what we're going to talk about today. And usually we talk about that person's area of expertise or something like that. And we talked about that a little bit, but I know you're going to share your story today. And I think that we don't do enough of that. It kind of, something clicked when we started to talk about that I think that people want to hear the story of other small business owners sometimes. And I'm glad not everybody wants to open up and share their story. So thanks in advance for doing that today.
Sure. No, you're welcome, man. I enjoy this, in fact.
Yeah. I think, there's a lot of people that probably started off like you, that they had an interest in real estate investing and they got a lot of education, and either they invested or they didn't, and they found themselves in some sort of derivative of real estate investing and not necessarily doing exactly what they thought they might be doing or what the books and tapes that they bought said they were going to be doing, but it was some kind of peripheral business that was still in the same, kind of industry or place, if you will. And that's kind of what happened to you. Is that right? Yeah.
I was in college. I'd see these info commercials at night, and I was married young. I was still in college, and I was married and had a child, and my last 2 years. And so I'd stay at when I was younger, I couldn't sleep as well, and so I'd see these info commercials, and they started. So I would buy them. I'm a voracious reader. I love to read. I'm always wanting to educate myself, and so I would buy these things, and whether it was Dave Deodato from 1988, he was kind of the first no money down guy, and then Robert Allen and Carlton Sheets way back in the day. This is stuff that's from the 1988.
Yeah, that's the cassette, back in the cassette day tapes.
Yeah,
cassette tape
CDs
days.
And no DVDs, no CDs. Yeah, and so I was always reading this stuff, and how to buy property, no money down, and and I always my wife at the time, she would get so mad at me for buying another book and tape, but the thing was, which a lot of people don't do, is I always took action when I read these things. It wasn't something I just got all excited about and put up on the shelf and then went back to my normal life. And I always read it and I always implemented it, and the stuff worked. So I started coming up with if I could buy one property a year, like a 401k, no money down, or back then there was a lot of VA foreclosures, which were really easy for investors to buy. And So I started, when my thought was if I could buy one house a year and hold on to it I had to, no speculation, I had to rent out for PITI, at least break even, or maybe you want a positive, but you just don't want a negative.
Right.
And as long as it did that and I bought in good school districts, then if I just did that for one time a year and I held on to those till I retired, I'd have 20 free and clear houses. And so I started doing that. And I remember the first thing I bought was, back then you had VA foreclosures. It was a blind bid. You didn't know if you're going to win or not. So you didn't even know if you're going to have the winning bid. So I put in 5 bids for VA foreclosures in Florida. And I was working with a realtor out of Santa Barbara here, and he had a team out there, and he'd send me these photos. There was no internet back then. It was
right.
It was just a package of photos, and he'd send them to me, and I'd look them over, and then we come up with a bid. And so I remember the first time I put in 5 bids, for 5 properties, and thinking I'm lucky if I get one of them, but I got all 5.
Oh wow!
And I had to go to my wife and go, "We're the proud owner of 5 new foreclosures that are rental houses now." And she flipped. She was like, "We don't even own our own home, and you're buying VA foreclosures." And so, but that, to be honest, that first house I bought back then is now free and clear. Now I went through a divorce 8 years ago, and my wife got all the property, and which is fine. I kept my company, but that first house is now free and clear. So that's think about it. If you had 20 houses in your 50s or your 60s, and you're getting $1,000 a month rent, and they're all free and clear, could you live off $20,000 a month?
Sure. Yeah.
Sure. You don't have to worry about Social Security or bank. That was kind of my plan.
Yep.
So, and then 1 became 2, and 2 became 3, and duplexes and triplexes. And at the time of my divorce, I had about 50 properties. So, but the concept worked. So here I was in my 20s doing things which my peers weren't doing. I was buying houses like it was like they were cars,
Yep.
and such. So, but anyway, so the backing up, when I graduated from college, so I was already primed how to handle foreclosures because I was buying them. And so when I graduated from college, I saw an ad in the paper, management training position, First American Title. And I go, oh, for my studying real estate, I knew what title was. And I go, oh, so I gave them a call and interviewed with them, and didn't realize that, a management trainee position was you start in the mailroom and you work your way up. And that's literally what I did.
Yeah.
I actually was not in the mailroom, but I did back then. In order to get title documents or records, it was all on microfilm or microfiche. And so my job for 8 hours a day was to sit at a machine and punch a button for title officers to get the book and page to the document they're trying to search. And but see, back then, again, there was no iPhones or anything like that. So I had my Walkman with my headphones, and I was listening how to buy mortgage properties, no money down, for 8 hours a day while I was punching this and smelling all these fumes, and
yeah.
Anyway, and they told me, okay, you're Dave, you're probably only going to be here 3 months. And it turned out the market dropped. And so I was there for 8 months.
Yeah.
And then I learned rather quickly that in title insurance and title in general, that when refinancing is good and business is good, when that slows down, the title companies will ramp up and then lay off 30% of their staff. So I learned rather quickly, I need to master something that nobody else wants to do so I could keep my job.
Right.
If you become so valuable, they can't get rid of you, kind of was my thoughts. And so
you were at a young age, you were very insightful as to how to keep a job when that's just, people don't generally think like that when they're in their early 20s. And then also how to kind of lay stepping stones for building wealth, which pretty much everybody that I know, probably the biggest regret I would say most real estate investors have that I've experienced is that they didn't start at a younger age.
Well, again, when you study, I just keep reading and reading and reading. I still read, I still buy tapes, I still buy everything. I visit websites like there's all such massive great content. And one of the things I learned rather quickly was about compounded interest. Somebody who starts investing or saving starts in their 20s. If you put in away money for 20 years and you stopped at 40, and if you're making 8% on your money, through compounded interest, if I just did it from 20 to 40 and stopped and didn't invest any more except what was coming, I was already investing with through compounded interest, that if somebody started in their 40s, I would have way more money than they would. You'd be a multimillionaire just off putting a little bit of money away, making 8% on it. And that, so I learned that. I'm like, okay, so I read that when I was 20. I'm like, okay, I need to start doing that. So yes, I've always been, I remember my father, a very conservative guy, and he just could not believe, I can't believe you're buying real estate and fixing flips. And, he was, and then, unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago, but, last 15 years, we were close friends, and he was like my best friend. And he started like listening to me, not listening to me, like, Dad, hey, we should get into some gold right now. And he never would invest like that. And so, and then he started, and he, I now manage his trust now for my stepmother. And it was because he started getting a little more aggressive, because he started seeing that's calculated risk. You're not, you can still be aggressive if you have time, and you could ride waves up and down. The younger you are, the more time that you have, where time is your friend, it's not your enemy. And as you get closer to retiring, you can't go through cycles like that. So you start moving into more conservative investments and, bonds and such like that. So so I started that mindset. I was thankful that I had that at such an early age.
Yeah. So the market turned down, and you were in the mailroom. And where did you go from there?
Well, then I got promoted right before the downturn into searching. So now I went from the mailroom to title searching. And so, and we had a quota. We had to do 8 searches a day. That's where a title officer sends a request down to me to prepare the search, go through the public records, grab all the mortgages, the liens, all against a property, and to prepare a title commitment. So we had to do 8 searches a day. So I remember, like, everybody would there was always 3 stacks. There was the simple searches, they called them lot blocks, and then you had commercial searches, and then mortgage foreclosing searches. And so no one touched any of these, the commercial and mortgage stuff. And they just would go and do their easy stuff. And I'm like, okay, if I master this commercial stuff and this mortgage foreclosure stuff, I will keep my job, because I will be the best they got, because nobody wants. So I've always been about the messier the better, and if you can master it, you have security.
Yep. And
you become an expert. And so I would come in at 6 in the morning when nobody was there, and I'd punch out my 8 searches for the day from 6 to 8 in the morning, and then I'd rack my brain like a college thesis, on these commercial searches. Like one search would just, like, you'd be just exhausted by the end of the day. So then I mastered that, and that was right at the time the downturn started, and title insurance industry had never gone after title insurance for mortgage foreclosures. So
So what year is this, Dave?
This would be about 1993, 92, 93.
Okay.
And, the market peaked in 89 and then collapsed right after that. And it's funny, because back then in 89, interest rates were 13 to 18%, and people don't understand that now. You see 4%. If it goes up to 5, everybody's like, oh, 5%. No, back then it was 13 to 18%, So the downturn hit. And so right around that time, some from the upper echelon came down to my boss and said, who's your best mortgage foreclosing searcher? And that was me. And so then I was promoted, and I became the first title officer for First American Title to specialize in mortgage foreclosures. And that's all I did. So again, here I was studying how to buy mortgage foreclosed properties, and then setting myself up for this career in title that I never knew I was going to have, because I had studied real estate on the side. So again, the tip being, you can become an expert on it's like, if you turn the TV on, like, the average person probably watches 5 hours of TV a night or a day. And if you turn that TV off and you just read things, something like that, or self-help or something, that's where you can find the time to do deals, to make phone calls, to change, to really do things that most people can't. I was always willing to do what most people wouldn't do. Like yourself, like you and your wife, flipnerd.com too, comes out of what you started years ago. Had I talked to you probably 10 years ago and said, Mike, you're going to be this successful entrepreneur, real estate guy, and then you're going to start your own, you're going to have this brand and all that, you probably gone, what? So, but again, it's the same thing. I took that, I was reading and doing things and taking action instead of watching TV and whatever,
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So tell us kind of where things went from there, and how you kind of got to the point to where ultimately you started your own business, obviously.
Yeah. Well, again, so I was always really good about seeing where the marketplace was going, and it's usually about how to seize opportunities. And the one thing I just started doing is I started listening to what my clients kept calling me about. Well, Dave, why can't I live in Orange County, California, so I was doing Orange County mortgage foreclosures. Okay, and so I started getting these calls from lenders saying, Dave, why can't you do, I know you do Orange County, why can't you do Riverside County? Why can't you do San Bernardino or San Diego or whatever? And I go, I don't know, let's look into it. And so I did, and we did. So we go, okay, so now so Dave, now that you can do Southern California, why can't you do Northern California? Okay, all right, so now we can handle the whole state out of one office. So I saw this coming just by listening to the clients. Yeah. So I started going to my bosses and saying, look, national default is coming, and we can beat everybody to the punch. We need to create a national group that can handle multiple states or ultimately the nation. And then at that time, I'd been a title officer about 4 years, and I was burning out on it and was looking for promotion and wanted to do something else. And so I started going to my boss and saying, look, we need to build this national default group. I have this, I can see it in my mind, and it's 2 years, we can beat everybody, let's do this. I'm like, no, Dave, no. But we'll offer you this job up in Northern California to manage some office. And I go, I'm not relocating my family to go up there. So I quit. And well, I didn't quit. One of my sales reps, he had left, and he went to Fidelity Title, and then Fidelity, he called me and said, Dave, we want to build this national default thing that we were talking about, you and me, And so I went to my boss and said, look, I don't want to leave. I love First American. I'm loyal. I don't want it, but this is where the industry's going. We need to get there, and I'm the expert for it, and I want to do it. They said, sorry, Dave. And I go, well, then I'm going to go to Fidelity. But you sure you don't want to do this now? No. Okay. So I left. And unfortunately, I got into a bad situation, and 6 months later, I quit. And I was disillusioned, and I was just going to be like you and just do real estate full time, be an investor full time. 2 days after I quit, the First American called me back and said, Dave, we want to do this national default thing now. Why don't you come? Why don't you give us a business plan, and we'll see if we want to do it. And I go, no. Make me an offer, put me under employment, and they'll share all my secrets with you. And so then they did, and then I went there, and so with me and a laptop and a one-man office, I created what was then called Lender's Advantage. And that was basically a one-stop shop for Wells. Back then it was Countrywide and all the subprime lenders, New Century, Fairbanks Capital, Option One Mortgage, all that stuff's now either Wells Fargo, Chase, or Bank of America.
Yeah.
So I was handling, when I left the company in '99, we were doing over 50,000 mortgage foreclosing titles a month, where basically we would handle the title, the title and the foreclosure. I would outsource the foreclosure part of it, whether it was in a trustee state like California, or a judicial foreclosure state, say like New York. And so we would handle the title from foreclosure to REO and give them the lender a clean title and a policy, so that there's all these curative issues that would come with products like that. So I created this streamlining of cleaning up titles from soup to nuts, one-stop shop. And so when I left, we were doing 50,000 a month and $26 million in business a month.
Wow.
And I had 4 employees, as part of it.
And Dave, maybe take just a moment and kind of tell people what the significance of the title insurance products that existed prior to that, why they didn't cover foreclosures, and kind of what the significance is of the concept that you had that later became obviously a huge business.
Well, title insurance. To be honest, I couldn't really tell you why we never went after title insurance and mortgage foreclosures, other than that it just wasn't a prevalent thing,
Right.
For the '90s.
Right.
You see the amount of foreclosures was just massive. You couldn't ignore it. And I think that was the only reason. Prior to that, there wasn't, you had to, we did remember when back in the day, RTC and the S&L collapsed. That was in the '80s. We did have a product for that, but it wasn't foreclosure related. But the whole thing was that there was just so many foreclosures. I mean, the one in the '90s was nothing compared to what happened in '08, '09, what we're still kind of dealing with today. the numbers today are just staggering compared to what I was the first one that
Sure.
hit the 90s. So the only thing is that the lenders they needed, the foreclosure departments and the REO departments never worked together within the lenders. So they were wasting money. The foreclosure department would order one title, and they wouldn't clean up any of the old title problems that are associated with the chain. And then the REO department would get this bad title, and they would have to go through all this cleanup. So they'd have to order another search. And so again, the lenders would just complain to me as their title officer, and I just started hearing like, okay, there's a product there, there's a product here, there's boom. So that's kind of, again, just like anything else, your own clients will sell you Dave, why can't you do this? Why can't you do that? And if you get so many calls about that, whether it's on any subject, it doesn't have to be real estate, it can be something else.
Right.
And if they keep asking you, you're like, there's a need there, just fill the need, create a product that fills the need. And so that's kind of what I just did. Is I just kept listening, and by listening, I created, an industry first.
Sure. Awesome. So I guess kind of tell us, I'd like to apply kind of your lessons learned up to this point for folks that are listening, like how they could apply that to where they're at in their life, and, things they could do to kind of solve problems for other people. Maybe you could kind of, I know we're going to continue with your story of going out on your own and things like that, but maybe like up until now, what are some of the takeaways that people should be hearing right now?
Well, the takeaway is that, you're back in my days, employers were loyal and employees were loyal. That is gone. That's not happening anymore. So the average person is probably gonna have 7 different jobs in their life. And so because the takeaway is that you need to always be educating yourself and staying abreast of what's current. Keep yourself current. The example is, of being able to teach yourself something, even within your own. If you're a manager, take outside classes, read on how to be a better manager. What was it? There's so much great classic books like the 1 Minute Manager. That series is amazing. Start applying those kinds of things. You can always be a better manager. Separate yourself from your peers. There's always a lot of times within corporations, hierarchies, and there's nepotism, and there's these different things that, you need to separate yourself from everybody else in order to you don't have to wait to get promoted. You actually can create, I call it being exponential, jumping over things and going from 0 to 60, in your career a lot faster just by listening, speaking with people, networking, going to events in your industry, even on your own dime, educating yourself, listening, talking to higher ups. And I call it modeling. Okay, so, if there's a job that you want, you just need to find the person who's doing that, take them to lunch, educate it's about, I call it relationship. Like about 5 years ago, I learned about what's called relationship marketing. It's the more people that you get in relationship with, and we're not talking about dating, we're talking about just networking, and picking their brain, taking experts to lunch, listening to things like we're talking about now. Those things that's how I was at 20 years old doing things that people couldn't even do. And I was jumping over people in their 50s, and they didn't like it. They didn't like this young gun, this guy. And I actually ran into that. And that's how I ended up leaving my First American, because I ran into somebody who didn't like this young 24-year-old guy with all these big ideas. But again, the takeaway is on your free time, read, turn the TV off, go to events, network, find out what ideal thing you'd love to do. And usually if you're willing to do something, again, a lot of these are all cliches and everybody's going, oh, well, I've heard that before. But it actually really is true. It's true.
Yeah.
If you're passionate about something, if you're willing to find something you're so passionate about that you do it for free, the money comes. The job will come, the opportunity comes, because people want to be, wow, this guy really likes this, and he's really, so
Yeah,
It's
this is such a Dave. This is such a different message, this is fantastic. It's such a different message than the victim mentality that a lot of people, face here in America, unfortunately, or the people
right.
that are fast food workers that think they should be making $15 or $20 an hour. Where it's like, well, you're not, hopefully I don't. Well, I guess I don't really care if I offend anybody that's listening to this that thinks that that's a problem. But if you haven't differentiated yourself, if you don't have a skill that somebody else couldn't step in and do in a minute, then how could you expect to make more money or get passionate about what you do? Because quite frankly, you end up being replaceable, right?
Well, yeah, and especially for people who are like my age, 47, pushing their 50s or in their 50s, this generation that's coming up, they're born with technology. They have the iPhones, everything's they're forced to it. People like us, you have to be able to keep current with technology and stay abreast of your skill set.
Yeah.
But again, it's true. You don't have to buy into the fact that you gotta work for a company. Back in my day, it was like you worked for a company for 40 years and you got your gold watch and your pension and that's it. You have to be able to, especially if you got children, you put them in college, you've got to have some kind of investing going on in order to, because you're not going to make enough money. Just eventually you can, like I did. If you separate yourself and you get promoted, you can.
Yeah.
But again, you got to start doing things that other people aren't doing,
Right.
and it does. It's not. We're not talking rocket science, or I didn't reinvent the wheel. Did I create title products that were brand new? Yes, but how I got there was just modeling relationships. People trust me because I have my relationships within the industry allowed them to trust what I'm doing in order to create my own company.
Right.
It was because of those relationships and how to generate more business, and how you treat your employees. If you're an employer, those are your customers too, and how do you motivate them? How do you keep morale up? And how do you treat? I have a philosophy of reverse triangle kind of a thing where there's the more responsibilities that I've been put in my care, the more responsibility I have to be to treat them well and to make sure that I call it being a steward, like an upside down pyramid kind of a thing. So again, but I learned that by reading, by going to seminars, by meeting people, talking with people, and you'll find out most people, they're just like you, and they're, even though they're very successful people, they still have insecurities, and still they're just like you and me. And if you just got in, they like conversations a lot,
Right.
So,
yeah. Well, Dave, so talk about when you kind of left off and decided to go out on your own.
well, again, I was at this time, Lender's Advantage was very successful, but I started getting these calls, these regular calls. Again, here come these calls, and it kept happening so often. It's based on tax liens and tax deeds. For those of you who aren't very familiar with that, tax deeds are related to property. If you don't pay your property taxes, like Mike lives in Texas, in Texas, if you don't pay your property taxes, the tax collector in any other state can foreclose on your property to satisfy your tax bill. Just like if you don't pay your mortgage, the mortgage lender can foreclose on you. If Mike doesn't pay his property taxes in Texas, they can foreclose on his house, take it to auction to satisfy his property tax bill. So in Texas, it's a bid auction, like a mortgage auction.
Right.
Comes with a right of redemption, meaning if Dave goes, if I go and I purchase a property, say in Bexar County, which would be San Antonio, or Harris County, which would be Houston, and I attend one of the tax sales, then and I get that deed. If I try to go sell that property, that deed or title I got, the title insurance industry doesn't recognize that as good title. So I was getting calls from institutional clients who Wall Street money, who are spending hundreds of millions of dollars buying tax lien certificates. In other states, they sell not deeds, but they sell certificates, basically a year's taxes. They sell that to an investor because the tax collector has to collect this money if the owners are not paying. So they'll sell a lien to an investor, and you have the right to bid on that and accept a certain interest rate guaranteed by the law. Like in Texas, the tax deed acts like a tax lien certificate for 2 years. You get 25. It's a penalty state, meaning you get 25% of your money the first year, 50% of money in the second year. Other states, it ranges, say, 8% to 24%. So basically, the tax collector is saying, hey, Mr. Investor, if you pay these taxes, we'll give you a lien against the property. And once the homeowner or mortgage companies do finally pay, then you'll get your money back plus this 8%, 12%, 25% on your money. So and most of these people, most 95% of these liens get redeemed. They don't end up in deed. But in other states, like in my home state here in California, it's actually a deed state, meaning you're actually getting the property. You're bidding on the property, just like a mortgage foreclosure. So once you get the deed, you own the property. Now, you inherit a title problem. And this is where I kept getting these calls. Dave, I bought this tax deed property. I went to go sell it, and we opened up escrow, and the title company said, hey, Mike, sorry, buddy, we don't insure tax deeds. You got a title problem. You need to go get a quick claim deed from the former owner, and you get releases from the mortgage companies that were of record, or you need to do what's called a quiet title. In Texas, they don't have quiet titles, but in most states, a quiet title is a court action, where a lawsuit, quieting or meaning clean, clear, title in court, and that usually involves a lawsuit where you got to sue the former owners, you got to sue the mortgage holders, anybody who had an interest in the property, you have to foreclose on them again, and get the court to say, Mike, your title's now quieted or cleaned, cleared, and then the title company will feel comfortable to insure. And so I kept getting these calls. Why won't we? I kept running up the flagpole to senior underwriting at First American and saying, why don't we insure these things? And nobody could tell me. It's like, just tax deeds, no. And so I started reading, again, on my own time. I started pulling all the case law, and I found out that the biggest problem with these things is that the tax collector, it's all about notice. And no one can take your property away from you without giving you legal notice to let you know, hey, Mike, you didn't pay your property taxes. If you don't pay, we're taking this to auction. So here's your legal notice that gives you your rights, your due process rights, to know that this is going on and to protect your interest. We recommend you come in and pay your taxes. Otherwise, we're going to take your property from you. Now, that's called due process. And so the problem is that the tax collectors don't go beyond the call of duty to get that notice to you. And if you don't get the notice to people, they can hire an attorney and they can attack the title or attack the foreclosure and overturn it. It's kind of the same thing. You remember, Mike, like robo-signing and the mortgage foreclosure stuff?
Sure, yeah. Same
type of thing. Title companies now started, mortgage foreclosure used to be really something they always insured. Now they have to look at those and scrutinize those, and they look at them as a risk, and they didn't always used to do that. And that's because of the mortgage companies were not following proper procedures. And same thing on tax deeds. If you don't get the notice to people, they can overturn it or attack it. So you can imagine you've got this tax deed and this property, and you can't do anything for 6 months to a year while you're suing everybody. That was the problem, and that's why I kept getting these calls. Dave, why can't you guys insure? Come on, look, figure it out. So I did. Ultimately, I remember, again, we're giving some tidbits to people about if you're in your jobs, what happens when you run up against people who don't like you in your job and they're in your way. Well, that happened to me at First American, and again, I was 24 years old, and I'm talking about tax deeds, and and my boss was completely like, Dave, we're never going to do this, and if I see you working on these tax deeds, I'm going to fire you. You can imagine. Wait, I just built this $26 million business for you, and here I think we have another one, and you're going to stop me already. You're going to stop me from already again. But again, it was more of insecurities of people, who didn't, they didn't like me, this young guy with all these big ideas, and people get intimidated sometimes by that. And there's jealousy and there's envy, I think, and I don't, again, but it just, so I started work. At that point, I saw the writing on the wall that here comes the future of where I'm going to head, and either I'm going to do it with First America or I'm going to do it on my own. And one day I remember I was at Countrywide, I was one of my accounts on the mortgage foreclosing side, and I get a call from my boss saying, Dave, when you get back in the office, I need you to come into my office. I go, oh, here I go, I'm getting fired. So I came into my office, or in his office, and both my bosses were there talking as if I wasn't even in the room. They're like, yeah, that Dave Schumacher, he's a smart guy, he really knows what he's doing. And like I wasn't even in the room. It was really weird. And so, oh, hey, Dave, hey, hey, Cliff Morgan came down, and Cliff Morgan was the number 3 person for First American. He was senior counsel, and I had been meeting with with Cliff and these other gentlemen up there in underwriting on how can we do these tax deeds, insure them. And so Cliff came down to my boss and said, hey, you got an employee here, has a product, we want to see it done. It belongs in the default section, so we want to see it done. Promote him, make him a vice president, he's going to start this whole new division. And I didn't even know this. They didn't even talk to me about it. So I had a month to go around the country, and I started, again, meeting with what's called the National Tax Lien Association, and that's made up of all the institutional clients. So I started going, again, talking about how to build relationships and something new. So I started attending these conferences and speaking at them. I became a public speaker on tax deeds. So I became an expert again, and putting myself out there and grabbing cards, and started building this business. And so I did that for about a month, and then I went on a vacation to Europe with my wife. And during that time, I came back. The first day back, my boss called me, or he wasn't my boss anymore. I was at his level. He wasn't my boss. I was my
and then Dave, how old were you now?
It's probably 25, 26. Yeah. And so I guess my boss, or former boss, had finagled. He goes, Dave, while you were gone, we made some changes, and your division is now under mine. And I just went, no, this is going to work. So I went upstairs ready for this. Again, you always have to have plan B and plan C. What ifs? You got to be prepared for what ifs. And I was prepared because I saw the writing on the wall. When you're dealing with somebody who was going to hold you back, again, about being getting over fears and taking calculated risks. So I went upstairs, and I'd already been talking to people about starting my own company. And so I went up to senior underwriting. I said, look, if I start this company and I issue a certification to you, First American, our clients will pay us in lieu of an attorney. We'll be faster and cheaper. And now you guys will have an avenue of business that you would insure, and we'll indemnify you. Meaning if there was any claims, it's not your issue, it's mine, and tax title will do. So they said yes, and I went down to my boss and told him, and he goes, well, Dave, that's unfortunate because we're gonna have to lay. I told him, well, I go, hey, this taxing thing isn't going to work, and he goes, yeah, unfortunately, Dave, we've weaned you out of your old job, and now we're gonna have to lay you off. and I knew that the company doesn't like employment problems, and so I used to negotiate this stuff. And so I said, look, this is wrong, and he's like, okay, Dave, well, what's it going to take? And I said, well, I want a year's salary. And they said, well, no, but we'll give you 6 months. And I said, okay. So that's helped me start my company, Tax Title, out of my house. Yeah. 6 months later, I was growing so fast, I had to move into an office, and 15 years later now, and 15,000 orders later, and Tax Title is where it's at now. So it's a national company, and it works in all states, and it bridges the gap with investors who are buying tax deeds and wanting to sell and get title insurance for their buyers or their lenders. Our product, bridges them without a quiet title, and it's a faster and cheaper alternative. So. But again, in order to create that title product, I actually went out and bought tax deeds so I could step in the shoes of my clients, because it's a knowledge-based sale. Same thing. I bought mortgage foreclosed property so I could speak the language with lenders and attorneys, foreclosing attorneys. Just did the same thing with tax deeds. So I've invested in tax deeds. I've used self-directed IRAs to do that. But again, the takeaway again is calculated risks, having to deal with people in your own company that you're working for that may not like your big ideas, but you have to just be a master of something that nobody else can do. And if it can't work within that company that you're working for, well, then go start your own.
Yeah, Dave, it sounds like your story is it almost would sound like you had it fully mapped out. Like you kind of were always a step or two ahead of your circumstance. And I think a lot of people kind of find themselves just kind of drifting through life, and opportunities may arise, but they were just it seems like it was just more of fate or whatever that might kind of pop up. I mean, what advice would you give to people to kind of be a little more purposeful with the direction that they're heading in their career, in their business?
Again, pay attention, listen, especially to clients. If you're in sales or whatnot, your clients will tell you what products they want. But it's also, again, building relationships within your company, your coworkers. They're your customers too. And you never know. One of the things I learned is you never know where people end up. You start in the mailroom, and those people could be running companies later, and they remember you along the way. So be careful about how you treat people when you're working with your coworkers, how you treat your bosses, it's about relationships. And you never know where people end up, 30 years later in their career. And if you've had a good relationship with them, they'll remember you, and then all of a sudden they want to pull you with them, to they'll remember you, and then you can get promoted and or get job offers, that you never thought. It's just because they remembered you and you had a good relationship with them.
Yeah, and I've talked a number of times about building relationships with people, and you talked about the importance of it here today. Can you kind of share any kind of tips or advice on how to nurture those relationships over time? Because I think a lot of people tend to believe that networking, if you will, I'm using air quotes here for those that are listening, networking is the act of exchanging a business card with somebody. I
Right.
met you somewhere, and you and I both know you go to a conference or an event or a club meeting of some sort, anything, and you come home with a pocket full of business cards, but
Yeah.
that's just the beginning of what that relationship could be. Can you kind of share any advice on how to nurture those things over time?
Yeah, I call it. It's all about the follow up. And you can do that even if you're an employee. Working with people too, is like if you have an assistant who works with you or whatnot, and there's always opportunity that if they're having a hard day or it's kind of like with your wife, that's a relationship too. Like if you bring flowers. I mean, I'm not telling you to do that at home, or that's at your home, but it's the same thing. People can have hard days, and if you can just be thoughtful, and nurture, people that work with you or under you, or offer, because I've invested, I've helped teach my employees how to invest, and just again being generous, and then, but when you're networking outside and you're doing these conferences and you're grabbing the business cards, it's about following up. Hey, nice meeting you. We talked about possibly this. What's a good time to talk with you? Hey, when's your next conference? So you start building that, and especially with technology and like what we're doing, Skyping. I mean, that's a way to, if you're not in a home state of that person, you can still keep in touch with them. But it's about follow up. It's always been about the follow up.
Yeah. 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 I think and so few people do that well that it's not that hard to stand out really and differentiate yourself in terms of building relationships.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Dave, kind of any last minute takeaways here in terms of, how you'd advise people. I know thank you for sharing your story with us today. And I think, I hope what people got out of this was to always be thinking about what's next for you in your business or your life. I mean, any kind of takeaways here that you want to make sure that people heard?
Again, just reiterating, too, is don't be afraid to take chances and calculated risks. Whether it's within your job, whether you're an entrepreneur, the other being, save your money, put money away. Like when you pay off a bill, like let's say you had a car payment and you paid off your car, and let's say that payment was $300 a month. That $300 a month, keep acting like you still have that $300 a month payment because you're used to not having it. So start stocking that away. If you ever buy property, don't sell it. I remember telling my dad, one day, like, Dad, remember, like, throughout your lifetime, think about you had this home, and I go, Dad, what was your first house you ever bought? And he was in the military when I was younger, and it was a VA foreclosure, or not, it was a VA loan. And I go, what'd you buy the house for? He goes, $10,000. And I said, what was your mortgage payment? He goes, $138. And I go, were you nervous about that $138 payment? He goes, yeah, I wasn't sure how I was going to pay that. And I said, so again, and later he made money in real estate without realizing he was doing it. But again, the take two is what was once uncomfortable will become comfortable. Yeah. If you remember any one of us who learned how to drive, remember the first time you drove out of your driveway and you drove yourself to school or something, the first time how nervous you were. 3 months later, you're tooling around town, not even nervous, right? Same thing. First day on a job, your first flip, Mike, go back to your first flip,
Yeah.
You're nervous,
Yeah.
The first time you ever did something, and now 6 years later and 40 houses later or whatever you've done, it's not uncomfortable anymore. That's
right.
The same. That's the big takeaway is what was once uncomfortable will become comfortable. You just got to put yourself out there, and then it becomes easy. The more practice, more times you practice, the better. I tell people if you're going to do fix and flips or if you're going to do tax deeds, go to auctions without buying. Just go and do the homework and attend the auction and see if you would have won or not. And you can do that if you're afraid of buying something. Well, you can go through that exercise without buying. That's always been helpful for people. And practice. But then the one thing you got to do is you eventually got to pull the trigger. You got to make those offers. You got to put the offers out. You got to buy, take a calculated risk. Don't get caught up in auction fever, but if you have to speak to, a homeowner and that makes you nervous, well, the more times you do it, the better. So just keep doing it, and eventually it'll become comfortable. Or partner up with somebody who can teach you, like Mike. You have Flip Nerd and you're coaching and all that. That's that can help as well. But eventually, you got to do your own. You got to take an action. You got to make an offer. You got to maybe quit a job that if you're unhappy, change it. You got to change. Don't live unhappy.
Bet on yourself.
Change that. You're the only one who can make yourself happy, and it may take a calculated risk to change it, but you can change it. But you got to educate yourself, network, relationship marketing, make offers, save your money, invest your money. I think that's most of the takeaways.
Yeah, just kind of bet on yourself. Be willing to take risks. Well, Dave, thanks so much for sharing your story today. I think there's a lot of great lessons in here for everybody that's listening, and I definitely appreciate you opening up and kind of sharing it with us.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Yeah, have a great day.
All right, you too. Thanks.
Are you a member of FlipNerd.com, the most robust real estate investing platform in existence, where you can find off-market wholesale deals and great vendors literally in your market? You can get access to advice from experts and learn about local clubs and events right in your backyard. If not, please visit FlipNerd.com and register for a free account. You can register in less than a minute. It's pretty much the coolest site that's ever existed in the real estate investing industry, so get on over to FlipNerd.com.